Hey, so I wanted to do a quick review. I rolled the dice again, and this time a little bit out of my normal wheelhouse, so some unknown territory here. But not a very big risk or investment. The previous videos you've seen, a lot of them are katana. That's where most of my experience is in Japanese swordsmanship. Because as I've also mentioned in those other videos, I've spent a lot of time in Chinese martial arts as well, including weaponry. My favorite Chinese sword is the Jian, the straight sword, but I've spent some time with the Dao. Unfortunately, back in the day, talking about 70s, 80s, 90s, the common one you'd get in the schools were the willow leaf or the oxtail, the wide curved flat things, which were usually sheet steel with chrome plating and not very good fixtures and handles. And they just never really impressed me, so I didn't spend a whole lot of time with them. Today you can get much nicer versions of that, almost true works of art and really, really good swords from some of the forges. And here's an example from Lyuesword. But the kind I got was not one I'd ever had any experience with, and that would be a Tang Dynasty style Dao, a Tang Dao. And we're talking 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century AD. Supposedly the inspiration for the katana, and you can see that reflected in the ancient chokuto and also the modern ninjato. So I'll give you an example of what that looks like in terms of its straight profile, and almost looks like certain kinds of tachi and things like that and some of its fixtures. But the other reason I decided to select this particular blade was another thing that had caught my eye over my years in the martial arts, but I never wanted to spend the money on it because I was afraid of how it was put together. And that would be the Zatoichi blind swordsman style stick sword. And the reason why I never bought one was it's basically built like a shirasaya. And I'll post a picture of that. It looks like kind of a one piece of wood that's split in terms of a handle and a scabbard. Those are not designed for actually using the blade. Those are designed for transporting and storing a blade until you can get it in the real fixtures. So other than glue holding the two sides together, that's really all you've got. And if you were to cut with it, it's likely to just split right through that seam, and that would be dangerous. What's also dangerous is the fact that since there's no guard or wrapping, if you were to thrust, there's a high likelihood that your hand's going to slide up onto the sharp bit, and yeah, that would not be good. So that's why I never got the Zatoichi sword. I was concerned with both of those problems. Japanese swords, when they're finished and have proper fixtures, solve those problems by having metal fixtures and a guard and cord wrapping and a lot of other things holding that wooden handle together and reinforcing it. So what I got from Lyuesword for 160 bucks, by the way, was not only one of their cheapest swords. It's their cheapest sword that's also got their proprietary 1095, 1060 Damascus, and it was also their cheapest Dao. And as a Tang Dao, it's kind of a stick sword on steroids, so that it fixed all of my concerns with the stick sword and still giving me a stick sword. So it is missing certain fixtures that would be like belt loops and sword frog kind of attachments and things like that. So it's very plain, but it's deceptive in its simplicity. So let's take a bit of a look at this. First of all, you have some really sturdy brass fixtures in terms of a good solid pommel cap and what would be on a Japanese sword of fuchi, a handle collar, which is also integral to a minimalist guard like an aikuchi in Japanese tantos and things like that. But it's sufficient to keep a hand from sliding up onto the blade, so that's actually very well done with the same kind of dragon theme throughout. Also, you'll notice the handle is wrapped in a nice even cord wrapping. Now, it looks a little cheap and cheesy, but I've repaired and reinforced handles like this before, where you take a really high tensile cord and you wrap it around tight and glue it down. And this is very grippy, and it hasn't moved around during practice and cutting. So I'm pretty pleased with that. You'll also notice those things are repeated in the scabbard. So you've got a scabbard mouth that is the brass fixture and some more cord reinforcement, and then you've got a really good solid cap on the end of the scabbard that's the same thing. Now the scabbard is made out of what looks like a really nice rosewood. I'm not quite sure what kind of wood it is. I think it's rosewood, which I expect is the same wood as the handle. Now, being a stick sword, one of the things that I had to compensate for when I got it was that there's no directionality. There's no taper to it. like there would be with a katana saya. And I had that problem I noticed, I pointed out in a video where I did this Asuka Tanto from Musashi that has no directionality. So shortly out of the box, I did put a couple of little tactile grooves in the scabbard to tell me which side is up, basically, which is important for drawing a single-edged sword, so I know where the blade's facing, but doubly important for resheathing it, especially if you're trying to be stylish and not look down at the scabbard while you're doing it, because if you tried to shove this thing in backwards, yeah, that's not going to go well for you. But that was a cheap 5-minute fix, and that was the only modification I made. Otherwise, there are a couple things about this blade that surprised me. Now, buying a sword online, you get some nice pictures and you get some specs, but that really doesn't tell you how it feels. So you are taking a chance. Now, obviously, $160 wasn't a big chance, but I had a couple of quick surprises when I received this thing that worried me, but not for long. Thing one is because it is designed to look like a stick sword, your handle is the same width as the scabbard. Now that makes it 1/4 of an inch wider across this way than the average katana handle, and with my injury, my brace reducing my grip diameter, I was concerned about that. However, after just a few minutes of use, I realized this thing actually feels really good in my hand, so that extra width, that's not an issue. The other thing that struck me as soon as I picked up the box that it was delivered in is that it was a lot heavier than I expected. There are other versions of this sword on the market from other forges that some people have actually been worried about being too light and flexible. Well, this is the opposite. This thing weighs about 3.5 pounds, and that's nearly a pound heavier than the katana that I'm used to. So again, with my injury, I was worried that I bought something that was too heavy for use. But as it turned out, the balance and dynamics of this blade made that not a problem. So let's take a little bit more of a look at this. The scabbard fit is really good at the collar. There is a slight bit of rattle towards the tip, but it's not too bad. And again, I'm not worried about that for a couple of other reasons. First of all, let's take a look at the scabbard. Now, the scabbard is this solid thing, like I said, with metal fixtures. And there are schools of Japanese swordsmanship where they'll use the saya as an emergency parrying device. But with a modern katana, that scares me because they're usually made out of very light, soft whitewood, and I wouldn't think they'd hold up to any impact like that whatsoever. And if they did, you'd immediately have to get another scabbard. This thing is solid and dense, and it almost feels like a weapon in itself. So I would certainly have some confidence using it that way. So it's almost like I got an extra stick or baton to go with my sword. So that's actually kind of a cool little touch. The other thing about it would be its deceptive simplicity. So inspiration for the katana that you will see in a lot of ninjato, you've got something that's very straight and very plain looking. But as you look closer, starting with the blade collar, not a habaki, but whatever they want to call it here, it's very well fit. It has a very slight rain-style grain pattern to it. The planes of the blade are very even. There are no ripples, no flaws. The main, what would otherwise be the ridge plane on a katana, is very wide and flat. Other swords, they might have a little bit of convexness to them, so they're more like a fuller, reducing some of the weight of the sword. That's not true here. It's totally flat. And that adds more heft and weight to the blade. Like I said, it's a heavy blade, but the balancing point is about 4 inches off the guard, so it handles remarkably well for its mass. It's very quick in the hand, one hand or two hands, so I have no problem with that. The spine is slightly rounded. There's no peak to it, but that makes it really comfortable. Not only smooth in the draw, but if you're going to do any kind of half sorting, it's really nice to get your hand on. Between the spine and those wide planes, you can get a good purchase on it. Now, the edge, there's a little bit of concern there because that edge plane it's pretty shallow. It's not very wide. It's almost chisel looking, but there is no secondary bevel or grind to it. That goes very straight and evenly right down to the edge, which is sharp, and despite the profile, cuts exceedingly well. Now, there is a nice distal taper. It does start fatter down here and gets thinner as it goes up here. Also, profile taper. It is wider here than it is across the top. Your edge plane does terminate in an angular matching tip plane, tip shape. This is actually very common to ninjato and also to modern tactical katana and tantos and things like that. It's designed for penetrating, hard surfaces like car doors and stuff like that. But it makes for a very strong tip in the thrust. I have no concerns with it failing. And the same thing with the edge. It's held up very well to cutting and cuts a lot better than I thought it would. Cuts really well, actually. Something that's not going to show up easily on my camera, but I'll give it a shot here with my lighting. Like I said, I got their cheapest sword with their Damascus, and it's a gorgeous, gorgeous pattern, especially on these flats. For something so simple, it's so beautiful and elegant. You'll also notice that there's some characters on the blade. That is a free option from Lyuesword, by the way, where you can get a couple of things engraved on the blade, but the option I chose was to get the smith's name, Li Longqui. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. If not, I apologize, sir, but it's apparently one of their senior smiths, and I feel like that was a good choice, especially seeing the result, because I really feel like the artist's name deserves to be on this. For something that's so simple, it's quite the work of art, and it's very, very handy as a weapon. You could use this as a katana. You could actually use it as a straight sword, even though it doesn't have the back edge to do certain things with. And I could use it, obviously, as a Dao, and any combinations and hybrids thereof. So it's quite a handy blade. It's very sturdy. It's very well made, and it's, frankly, for being so simple and basic looking on the surface, it's gorgeous. And these things are getting a little bit more popular, this particular kind of Tang Dao and Tangzhen. You're starting to see more of these. You're starting to see more Hanzhen, more classical swords as compared to the Ming and Qing style swords that were common in martial arts schools. So I'm glad they're reviving these things. They're amazing. And I will try to do some action videos so you can see it in action once the weather starts cooperating with me, so you may see those down the road. But until then, I hope you found this interesting and informative. Look at a Tang Dao from a modern smith, and I hope to see you again.